What we were looking at yesterday was Daniel chapter 7, and we had a brief look at Revelation, and I gave you the challenge of looking at the beasts and the development of the beast in Revelation from chapter 12 all the way through to chapter 17, and I asked, would anyone know? Would anyone know how they've been developed and why they've been developed and what they actually portray? Anyone? You don't need to. It's a really interesting thing, though, to note. Remember how it starts off. What can you remember from memory how it starts off in Revelation 12? The beast looks like what? Can you remember? It's red, isn't it? And it looks like a dragon, doesn't it? Right? Dragon. Now the word dragon there is the word Draco, D-R-K-O, I think, from memory, and it's a symbol. The Draco was the crocodile, and it's a symbol of when the Romans defeated the Egyptians, right? The crocodile was a symbol of Egypt, right, down at the River Nile. And when they conquered Egypt, Cleopatra was part of that time. When they defeated the Egyptians, they took that symbol, and that symbol then denoted that they are the conquerors of Egypt. They are the new power. They're the new boss in town, as it were. Okay, so that's the Draco, the red dragon. And it was a symbol of, if you think about the Roman Empire, the first phase, the time of the Lord Jesus Christ, what was that first phase? What was going on religiously? Did they serve God? Did they serve idols? What was it? It was pagan, great, super. It was pagan Rome. It was pagan Rome, the red dragon, okay? And it had 7 heads and 10 horns. That takes you all the way back to Daniel chapter 7. So it's kind of saying, look at the beast in Daniel chapter 7. This is the first phase. It's going to be pagan. That's exactly what happened at Rome. It was pagan Rome. What about then the change there in the next chapter? You remember this here? Gives it away, the headline, right? The key here, so when you look at history, we don't want to spend too much time, but I just want to convince you really that this book of Revelation, which was a message to his servants, okay? There's something very special about the book of Revelation. It's to show unto his servants those things that shall shortly come to pass. So it's a message for the saints. And it's the only book in the Bible, of the 66 books, that's a personal message of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's an amazing book. It's the risen Lord. It's his book. And he directs it to the servants, not to everyone. That's why it's such difficult language. That's why there's so much symbology, because he doesn't want anyone just to pick it up and read it. He wants you to read it and to understand it, okay? So let's try and decode this. Well, it's got 10 horns, and upon the heads the names of blasphemy. So it's going to be blaspheming. Well, the pagans didn't really blaspheme because they didn't even believe in God. They believed in all these crazy other gods. But this is going to change. There's words of blasphemy. And after pagan Rome, does anyone know what happened? Who was the man that brought about a new era in Rome? Can you remember? Constantine, right? So this was written at the end of the 1st century, and 200 years later, this incredible person called Constantine, and what he does near the end of his life, he changes pagan Rome to Christian Rome. And all he does really, he takes all the Roman gods and he makes them Christian symbols. One of the most famous Roman symbols was a mother and child, okay? And then suddenly people are worshipping Mary and the baby Jesus. So if you go into churches around the world, you see lots of Marys, don't you, holding a baby Jesus. Well, it all comes back to the time of Constantine, taking a Roman set of symbols and making them Christian literally overnight, okay? And that went on for 500 years, this Christian Europe, right? And then something else changes. We have this, and it says that this one doesn't have 10 horns. It's telling us something very significant takes place. It has 2 horns. And what are horns symbols of? We're going to finish in history here, and it's going to get easier. But just this, I want you to notice this, how it develops. It's really nice how it develops. What do horns represent? It could do, but there's something a little easier than that. Just powers, okay? You're not far off. Powers, okay? And you could describe it as east and west. The two legs of Rome. You could describe it as that, because what happens here, you have the beginning of something called, come in and join us, Jordan. You have something that's going to last for 1,000 years, and it starts by a man called Charlemagne. Has everyone heard of Charlemagne? Well, this is Charlemagne, and he establishes the Holy Roman Empire. And I'm going to tell you a bit of the history of what we said before. Do you remember those 10 barbarian states a few classes back? Well, when the last one was removed, right, that were Arian, that believed in the singleness of God, you have this, right? It's like, all right then, it's official now. We got rid of the 10 barbarian states, and the 7 that remain, well, they believe in the Trinity, so we can have something united, and we'll call it the Holy Roman Empire. And it lasted. Anyone know how long it lasted? Long time, actually. Lasted 1,000 years. This is history. And if you go to a place called Aachen in Germany, you can see a cathedral in Aachen, and there's a throne in Aachen, and that's where Charlemagne and all the subsequent emperors, that's where they reigned. They reigned in Europe, sat upon this throne. And it was called the Holy Roman Empire of the Germanic, or the German nation, because Germany ran this empire for 1,000 years. Quite interesting, isn't it? So you got 2 horns. Isn't that amazing? So if you think about Daniel chapter 2, the gold and the silver and the brass, we can look in history and go, wow, that goes perfectly. So does this. So does this, right? Now what I want to do, I'm going to make it illustrated, right? I want to show you some interesting things about the woman that rides the beast, and we're going to try and make it relevant today and exciting, and then I'm going to try and finish in good time so we can have some questions and answers and a chat at the end, okay? All right then, so let's see if we can get through this. So there's Charlemagne, and that's the Holy Roman Empire. This in yellow here is the Holy Roman Empire. So that region was there in existence for 1,000 years, and then what brought it to an end was really the French Revolution. All these things are all kind of interconnected, where the French went, well, we don't want the Roman Catholic Church running our lives anymore, and these things were kind of overturned. And the Roman Catholic Church, for a period of 50 years, was put in exile. And it was re-established by, you probably won't remember, the Lateran Treaty in 1929. Remember that? That was in our first set of slides, the Lateran Treaty in 1929. And I think that was signed by the Italians, actually, in 1929, and that brought about the reconfirmation, really, of the papacy and the Pope, etc. So it's relatively recently, if you think about it, 1929. If you're in 1926, there was not a Pope, and there wasn't a Vatican, and all those things. It's kind of recent. Right, so that's the throne in Aachen. Right, so we want to look at this woman that rides the beast, okay? Now, we want to kind of race through these things. A woman, I'm sure you know, is a symbol of the church, the ecclesia. And she's denoted as a bride in waiting, a virgin, someone who's waiting faithfully for her husband to come. That's what we are described as, or should be described as, whether we're boys or girls, brothers and sisters. We're all really denoted as this bride in Christ, waiting for the groom to come, who's going to usher us, and we're going to have this great wedding when he arrives. So we are to be virgins. We are to be chaste. We should be absolutely devoted for him, waiting faithfully for him. All right? So if you have a woman described as this, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and upon her head the crown of 12 stars, and being with child, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So we have a woman in Revelation chapter 12, and suddenly this whole figure of a woman, a bride, an ecclesia, as a virgin, we have this woman who's now with a child, okay? So she's not chaste. You know what I mean by that? She's with a child, right? She's not a virgin. But we know that the woman is representative of the ecclesia, a virgin as an ecclesia. So if you have a woman with child, then you have an ecclesia that has not been faithful. This is an unfaithful ecclesia. This picture of a woman and child is an unfaithful ecclesia, which is interesting, isn't it? Because if you go into churches today, as we've already said, you see this mother and child, and if they knew that in reality it is a symbol of an unfaithful church, an unfaithful ecclesia, yet ironically, paradoxically, it's everywhere to see. Okay? Right, so remember what we did in Daniel 7. I'm going to run through these things, and I'm going to just bring out some interesting points about this woman that rides the beast. So, shall we have a look at Revelation chapter 17, please? Revelation chapter 17. And the purpose, really, of prophecy is to make it real. I don't want to spend time looking at ancient civilizations that lived ages and ages ago. What I want to do is make it real for you as young people. This stuff is happening today. In Britain, this happens a little more closer to hand, really, because this is all happening on the continent of Europe, which is outside Britain now, right? Or will be soon. Brexit. So first of all, then, she is described as the mother of harlots, okay? So it's very clear, then, she's unfaithful. It's not just my interpretation of Revelation chapter 12, a mother with child. She is the mother of harlots, okay? The mother of harlots. Now, she's the mother. In 1565, there was something called the Council of Trent, where the bishops all came together and they were establishing the church. And they were coming up with the idea of what the church should be. Look at the words here. If only they read their Bibles properly. This was the decree. It's called the Creed of Pope Pius IV. And this established the church that we see today. I acknowledge the Holy Catholic Apostolic Roman Church for the mother and mistresses of all churches. Can you believe that? You've got a harlot, the mother of all harlots, and the Roman Catholic Church say, we are the mother church, right? Takes the very words of Revelation 17. Has anyone been to Rome? I asked that question. You haven't, have you? Go there. It's really... my family, we just sat in front of St. Peter's, and we sat there for 2 hours just looking at this thing. Gone and seen the treasures. Treasures, it's got things like Napoleon's garments, things of Charlemagne. I mean, they're priceless tools, priceless gems, absolutely priceless. You couldn't sell it on eBay, right? I mean, it would crash eBay. These things are absolutely priceless. You just, unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And for a period of time, you could go to the Vatican and you could go downstairs and you could see, they've removed them now, I think there were some complaints, you could see the instruments of torture that the Catholics used. And you think, I can't believe this. These instruments of torture were actually used for Jews and Christians. You're looking at this, think, I know my history. That's really weird that they've got them there. And I think they only had them for about 6 months and then they've gone. Okay? Right, so, if you stand at St. Peter's, so I'm standing at St. Peter's, right, where Brother Craig is, where Brother Bob is at the back, just on the right-hand side, you've got a plaque that has these words: Sacred Lateran Church, universally for the city and the world, Supreme Mother of Churches. It's there as a Roman plaque. It's there in stone, right by St. Peter's, right? It's there on the side. Look at it in this way. It's just on the right-hand side. And that's the photograph. That's one of our photographs that we took of that. That's incredible, isn't it? That's the very language of Revelation. We read in verses 9 and 18 of the same chapter that she sits on 7 hills, and it's a great city. In the British Museum, has anyone been to the British Museum? Has anyone been to the Metropolitan Museum in New York? Anyone been to that? Yes. That's really super. That's closer to hand. Go to the Metropolitan Museum. Please come to my class tonight. So I'm going to talk about archaeology, and I'm going to talk about Daniel, and there's some fantastic things that have been discovered. They're really, really exciting. So please come to tonight's class. But in the British Museum, I've seen this coin, And it was minted in AD 71. So it was minted, it was struck before the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation. And here's Roma, a figure of Rome there, and she sat upon 7 hills, okay? And it says here in verse 9 of Revelation 17, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Okay? So the 7 heads, it's all symbolic language. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. If you look in Catholic encyclopedias, you have things like, it is within the city of Rome, called the City of 7 Hills, that the entire area of Vatican State proper is now confined. That there's no hiding it, and there's no shame. The city sits upon 7 mountains. And this is a guide that when we went last time we picked up, and you've got the 7 hills, the 7 mountains all plotted there, and you can go around. There's a tour guide to go and see these 7 mountains, and you're thinking, I should be holding a Bible here and telling everyone as we go around surveying these 7 mountains. Have you looked at Revelation 17? This place is going down into the earth one day, but we didn't do that on that day. Okay? She's called Mystery Babylon the Great. Right? So this is point number 3. And the whole Catholic service is one of mystery. What's that picture of? It's obviously Pope Francis, but what's he doing? What is that thing when he holds up a wafer? Yes, yes. And what do they believe happens to that wafer? Yeah, transubstantiation. Exactly. They believe that the wafer and the wine is literally the body and the blood of Jesus. Okay, so I'm not mocking them, but it's wrong, isn't it? I'm not making a joke about them. I'm not doing that at all, but it's wrong. They believe that something metaphysical happens to this bread and it actually becomes the body. You've got to believe more in that, don't you, than believing in the Bible, don't you, really? That the bread becomes the body of Jesus and the wine his blood. Well, that's what they believe. And it's Mysterium Fidei. That's what they call the service, Mysterium Fidei. That's what they actually call the very, very service. It's Mystery Babylon the Great. On one of the tiaras of the Pope, one of the early tiaras, you've actually got the word mystery on it. Okay, not on the most recent tiara. I think they felt a little uncomfortable that it was drawing attention to them, but the words mystery were there. Okay. The other thing is, if I said Mariolatry, do you know what that means, Mariolatry? I probably could guess it, Mary. It's the worship of Mary. The more I looked into this, the more I got really quite shocked. So these churches, again, not being disrespectful, I'm just trying to convey information to you, that's what I'm doing. But these churches, they worship Mary, okay? And these are all the titles of Mary. Mother of God, okay? Queen of the Apostles, Queen of Heaven, Queen of all creation. Mother of the Church, the door of paradise, the gate of heaven, Mother of mercy. And if you look particularly at recent developments of the Catholic Church, you will see that Mariolatry has become really the heart of what they believe, the heart of their doctrine. It's just interesting to know these things, isn't it? We know Mary to be a young woman. We looked at this in our exhortation, didn't we? She was chosen, she was of the royal line, and God selected her above all women to conceive and bring forth God's Son. She was a special woman, but she was a woman. That's why Jesus became Son of God and Son of Man. She had to be normally a woman, didn't she? Right? Now, I just want to show you a few things. How the Catholic Church have pushed this particular doctrine. So this is Pope Francis's coat of arms. Right? So, no. We want to go back there. A bit exciting, that, isn't it? Right? So, a few things. He's a Jesuit. Do you know what the Jesuits are? They were the secret army of the Roman Catholic Church. There have been periods of time where the Roman Catholic Church have disowned the Jesuits because they're really embarrassing. They've killed various royal members, right? So it's like, we're not associated with that, but they are Catholic, the Jesuits. And they would go out, and their intention has always been to remove powers upon the earth and ensure that Catholics are there controlling government. This is really important because Pope Francis is the first Jesuit ever to become Pope. So unlike Joseph Ratzinger that went to university and did his PhD, and I think he did another PhD, and he was spending his time looking at ancient texts and then naturally became the head of the Catholic Church because he was such a knowledgeable man and he understood Catholic doctrine. Does anyone know the background of Pope Francis? He's so popular. You've all seen pictures of him, haven't you? He's really, really popular. Again, I'm not criticizing him. I'm just telling you, right? I'm just telling you. Does anyone know the background of this man? Well, in his 20s, he was a primary school teacher. Do you know that? Does anyone know where he comes from? Nope. Had Spain here. Anyone else? South America? Argentina, right? Buenos Aires is the city he came from. Anyway, in his 20s, he was a primary school teacher. This is Pope Francis. Do you know what he was doing in his early 30s? Because he failed as a primary school teacher. He was terrible at it. He was terrible. So in his early 30s, he did something else. Do you know what he did? He was a bouncer at nightclubs. Do you know what I mean by bouncer? So he's the guy at the back. And he goes, oi, ow. Right? Take your drinks with you. That's what he did. And he had such a control over the youth in Argentina. You didn't mess around with this man, that he was approached by the Jesuits. This is true. And they said, you'd make a great Jesuit. He said, really? Yeah. So he became a Jesuit. And by the time he was 40, he was the head of the Jesuit order in Argentina. I think he did it in 8 years, and it normally, if you'd done everything and the wind was behind you and all the stars lined, it would take you 25 years. There's something very special about this man. He didn't mess around with this man. Jesuits put people to death, and he's the first Jesuit, right, to run the Catholic Church. So though he portrays himself as this very nice, genuine man, and I'm not calling his character into question at all, but I'm just telling you his history, his background. Isn't that fascinating? That's really interesting, isn't it? And as I said, Joseph Ratzinger was the first Pope, first cardinal to resign, I think in about 600 years, and he's come in and he's incredibly popular. Right? So, he's a Jesuit, here, this star here is the symbol of the Jesuits, okay? And he's actually got that now on his crest. So he's not ashamed of it. I'm a Jesuit. And then IHS there is the symbol, is a symbol there of Jesus and Mary. He is really pushing Mariolatry and Mary worship. And this doctrine is really frightening. There's over 1 billion Roman Catholics in the world, and they believe these things. Just look at these things. I find these very disturbing. So in 1854, Pope Pius IX said that there was the Immaculate Conception of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. That was the statement of doctrine. Someone interpret that for me. What does that mean? That she didn't sin. And that she also was immaculately conceived. So Jesus Christ, God intervened. God directed his power into the womb of Mary, and she conceived and brought forth a child. In 1854, they said the same happened to Mary. That Mary's mother didn't know a man, and God had intervened in her womb, and that she was immaculately conceived. Right? Mother of harlots, mother of harlots. In 1950, the doctrine of the bodily assumption of Mary to heaven. That's self-explanatory, isn't it? So, in 1950, a rule came into the church to say, actually, not only did Jesus ascend into heaven, but Mary did in 1950. And that's why now, so many in the earth, particularly in South America, but all over the world, there's this worship of Mary. And these statues now that were a symbol of mother and child in churches around the world, and they've been there for hundreds of years, in the last 50 or 60 years, they've taken on a slightly different dimension. People are worshipping these big Marys now. Isn't that terrible? Right? This is all part of Revelation. This woman who is the ecclesia, but she's absolutely full of false seeds, as it were, right? Seeds of lies and deceit. She's full of names of blasphemy, we read in verse 3. And I've told you, haven't I, that this is about a man claiming to be God and a man claiming to have the power to forgive sins. Look at this. I'm just looking at Roman Catholic sources. You can look at any Catholic source and you'll have something very similar to this. A man claiming to be God. Let's just see what it says here. The Pope is of great dignity and so exalted that he is not a man, but as it were God and the vicar of God. The Pope, as it were, is God on earth. That's Ferrari's dictionary. That's probably the most famous dictionary. He's God on earth. That's the first definition of blasphemy. It's very clear. Yes?
Vicar of God is, or Vicar of Christ is often, it was one of the Pope's first titles, and it was translated in Greek as Antichrist.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that. Very, very interesting. Everyone heard that? Super. Thank you. Right then, let's just see the second one. The power to forgive sins. Again, another Catholic source. The priest does really forgive sins in virtue of the power given to him by Christ. And genuine men and women go and they confess, don't they, their sins, and the priest forgives them. Hail Marys. And they're supposed to give so many hot Hail Marys, and they're forgiven. Again, it's not criticizing the individuals that are involved in it, but it's wrong. Right? The system is wrong here. This church, this ecclesia, has become untrue. She's arrayed in extraordinary wealth. Look at that, what he says there in verse 4. There's various items of clothing that are laid out here in verse 4. The woman, verse 4, was arrayed in purple and scarlet coloured and decked with gold, precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup. Okay, so she's very wealthy. And it's all there on show. So you got the source then. You can read that you can read that now. But the Catholic Church, I believe, is the largest landowner in the world. As you can see there, it's wealthier than banks and governments in the 20th and the 21st century. It's a huge, huge fund. In fact, my firm that I work for was asked to audit the Vatican Bank. I thankfully wasn't involved in it, but my firm was. And you know what? They went through the accounts. It's the first time the Vatican Bank have asked auditors to go in, and my firm could not sign off the accounts. The money was just so extraordinary, and there was such a flow of money, they couldn't sign it off. And so they had to step away, and no one has signed off the accounts of the Vatican Bank. That's amazing, isn't it? That happened about 2 years ago. Amazing, right? Just such a dishonest institution. She's in purple and scarlet coloured, okay? And if you look at pictures, if you go into any of the cathedrals or chapels, you will see something like this. So this is called the Cappa Magna, which means the Great Cape. And you can see it's a purple wool for bishops. For cardinals, it is red. It's a scarlet watered silk, and for the Pope, it is red velvet. It really denotes the leaders here, right? The leaders. And many of the colours that were part of the high priest in the book of Exodus have been picked up really and embraced by the Catholic Church. Here's the soutane, the cassock. The colour for bishop is purple and for cardinals is scarlet. Okay? And then it says it has a cup. And this is referred to as the chalice. Again, the Catholic Encyclopedia. It is the most important of the sacred vessels. It may be of gold or silver, and if the latter, then the inside must be surfaced with gold. So it's gold. It's either gold outside and inside. If it's silver on the outside, it's gold in the inside, okay? And it's a golden chalice here in Revelation chapter 17. And we know, if we trace the history of the chalice, it's Babylonian. That's where we first read of the chalice in history. And so this is Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. She's drunken with the blood of the saints. And we've already mentioned here the Spanish Inquisition. This is King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in Spain that signed with the Pope the Spanish Inquisition. That's the actual transcript there. And I think it was about, yes, we've got it there, just under 400 years. If you're a Bible-believing Jew or Christian, you were put to death. Then there was the massacre of St. Bartholomew. Have you heard of that? Has anyone heard of this massacre? Yeah? This happened in 1572, where the the Catholic armies went out. They found a group called the Huguenots. They were in France, and they put them into a wooden building. They lit it. There were windows, and as mothers and children tried to come out of the windows, the Catholic armies put swords in them. That happened in 1572, and at the end of it, the Pope here had this coin made to celebrate what had happened. The slaughter of the Huguenots in 1572. And here you can you see here? This is a figure of an angel of God killing the Huguenots. And what were the Huguenots? They were non-Trinitarian. In fact, back at our home meeting, back at our home meeting in Hall Green in Birmingham, we've got a Sister Mary, who comes from the Huguenots. Right? Her father, or great-great-father, escaped this incident and got to England. Well, I think got to Germany, actually, and then eventually came to Britain during the war. Isn't that amazing? And she gets very emotional when you talk about the persecution of Jews because of this. Yes?
The Huguenots, they're Calvinists, and they're from north and western France, and it's actually King Henry. In France, he's actually, he was one, and he's actually the one who started pushing out the Catholics because he wanted to get his family into power, so he pretended to be Catholic and then eventually kicked them out and let the Huguenots and the Calvinists stay in France, and eventually he's the one who started pushing the Catholics out of France.
Okay, really interesting. Thank you for that. Brilliant. Keep the mic. You might have another thought. That's really good. Thank you. Okay, but it's very sad, isn't it? She reigns over the kings of the earth, we read there in verse 18. We've got some pictures here. So who's that? So what's she wearing? Not the last picture. What's she wearing? What color is she wearing? Yeah, do you know why she's wearing black? So who is Queen Elizabeth besides our Queen? What does she represent? She's the head of Church of England, okay? She's the head of Church of England. She has to wear black because she's a religious head and she is inferior to the Pope. So he demands that she wore black, okay? The person who's changed all that is Pope Francis because he's trying to appease everyone. Everyone's one, everyone's happy. It's all part of that call to be part of the mother church, bringing her daughters in. That's what we're beginning to see with Pope Francis. So when Pope Francis met Queen Elizabeth II, he said, it's okay, you can wear white just like me. Isn't that interesting, right? So up till now, everyone had to wear black. an acknowledgement that the person that you're speaking to is greater than oneself. Now, this whole idea, what was this? Can you remember these pictures? Yeah, when he became Pope. Yeah, when he became Pope. So, look at what we've got on the screen. There were 132 states and international organizations. They sent delegations to the inauguration. The delegations included 6 kings or queens, 31 heads of state, 3 princes, and 11 heads of government. She rules over the earth. Does that describe any other? When maybe Prince Charles becomes king, will it be like this? I doubt it. How many people flew in for Donald Trump? Right? I don't know. I'm asking you. Anyone? Very different for this man. So, who are the people at the back there? Who's this man? You should know him. Bill Clinton, yeah? Who's this man? Yeah, George Bush. I thought I'd show you this picture. We're in America now. Right? You're 2 presidents. And they're kneeling and praying. And who's he? A dead pope. Okay? This was the man here. Does anyone know who this man is? Until Pope Francis, probably the most popular pope of the last 60 years. Who was he? You remember? John Paul the Second. Yeah, you got that, right? John Paul II, right? But look at that. And the woman reigneth over the kings of the earth. That's a good picture of the kings of the earth. You don't get any more powerful than Bill Clinton and George Bush, do you? Maybe Donald Trump. Okay? Look at this. Look at all these pictures. Look at all the colors everyone's wearing. Probably recognize some of these people. It's quite striking, isn't it, the color differences? That's a funny one. What are they talking about? Right? Who's that lady? What country does she run? Yeah? Germany, yeah? That's Angela Merkel. I don't know what they're saying, but they find it funny. Okay. The waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So this church here is over peoples and multitudes, nations, and tongues. It controls, it influences lots of different countries, lots of different people. 1.1 billion Roman Catholics, I think, at the last count around the world. It's true, isn't it? And if we're under any misunderstanding, then we've got this coin in 1825, which was cut in the Vatican, and it describes the Roman Catholic Church, and they have described her as a woman sat down, extending her hand with a chalice. Isn't that amazing? That's 1825. So even they accept that they're a woman with this chalice of Revelation chapter 17. Okay, so why does it get interesting? Well, you've got a woman sat upon a beast. That beast comes from Daniel. It's a Roman beast. It's a kingdom. Now remember, there was a little horn that comes out of the 4th beast, which was religious, but the beast itself was political. It was a kingdom. And here you've got a Roman kingdom coming together with a Roman church. And that's why Europe is so interesting. That's why we get so interested in looking at signs of the times of Europe, because that's the picture. When the church comes together with a beast, when a Roman religious system comes together with a Roman political force, then that's amazing, because that's Revelation 17 and 18, and we know Jesus Christ is going to destroy that system. When we see these two things come together, we're very, very close. Have we seen them come together? Of course we have. Right, let's just run through a bit of history before we have a chat. 1957, the European Union was established. The treaty was the Treaty of Rome. There are 28 countries in Europe today. They could have had it in any city. They decided that it would be the Treaty of Rome that would establish the European Union. Isn't that amazing? When the woman comes together with the beast, it started in 1957, and the law, the rule, was there in Rome. Just in case we're mistaken what it's all about, it's Roman. Isn't that amazing? It could have been German. It could have been somewhere else in Italy. It could have been French. It was Rome. And over the years, you've had all kinds of pictures that now portray Europe today. So, for example, this was Time magazine, which has here a woman with the 12 stars, that's Revelation chapter 12, with all the flags on the back of this beast. And interesting, I've looked at that very closely, and I've never been able to see the Union Jack. So I don't know what they were saying to us all those years ago. But there, all the flags of Europe, I think minus the Union Jack, the British flag, the woman that rides the beast. Here, if you've gone to Europe, those of you going to Europe soon, you'll pick up your euro, right, which is the currency of Europe. And some of those euros have a woman that rides the beast on the very coin, right? Here, Der Spiegel, a woman that rides the beast. We've had stamps that denote Europe. I think this was back in the early 2000s. We go to Strasbourg today, outside, this is the one in Brussels. Similarly, outside Strasbourg, you've got a woman that rides the beast. This is the headquarters of the European Union, and there's a picture of a woman that rides the beast. This is the one in Strasbourg, a woman that rides the beast, right? Their centre of parliament, their parliamentary building. You know what that's called? Does anyone know what that tower is called there? This is where all the ministers, when they fly in from all their 28 countries, they fly in and they go there. Do you know what that's called? Babylon Tower. That's what it's called. Babylon Tower. Right? Because it comes from Babel, these many words, many languages. That's the whole idea. Look at that. This is one of the posters for Europe. Europe, many tongues, one voice. That's the Tower of Babel, which is the foundation city, right? The founding city of Babylon. You've got Euroland here with a euro on the top, and that's the Tower of Babel, right? You've got the Eiffel Tower there in the back. I think that's one of the buildings in London. You've got the Tower of Pisa there, right? That's the new building that's going to be made in Europe. There's 12 stars that denote the European Union. And when you go right across Europe, you see these flags. You don't see any in Britain, actually, but as you cross through the continent of Europe, in every city you see these 12 stars. But there's 27, 28 countries in Europe, so it doesn't really portray the European Union. Revelation 12 verse 1 says, "And there appeared a great wonder, a woman, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." And this is what the European Union has said. The number of stars are 12, and it's not going to alter if the number of member states change, right? So irrespective, it could be 27, 26, 30, 40, 50, it will always be described as 12 stars. Revelation 17, verse 13 says, "These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." And then in verse 17, "For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast." Right? Think about that for a moment. What we're being told in Revelation chapter 17 is that these kingdoms will come together when they have one mind and they agree. And we've had men in the past, like Charlemagne, like Napoleon, like Hitler, who have come along and tried to conquer Europe and make them one big kingdom. And everyone has failed. They should have read Revelation chapter 17, because Revelation tells us that this kingdom will never come together under one king until they have one mind and they agree. They've got to do it voluntarily. That's amazing, isn't it? You've had 2,000 years of great leaders trying to stamp their authority all over these countries. Revelation says it's never going to happen. However powerful Charlemagne and Napoleon and Hitler are, it's never going to happen. They've got to agree with this. And that's what we're seeing in Europe today. They are agreeing. So we've just had an anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, and these are men, as we've just mentioned, who have tried to conquer Europe, but they've got to agree. Right? And when we see them agreeing, then Jesus Christ is going to come. I'm going to leave you there. This European continent, with all its countries, all the way through the history of time, men have risen up to try and conquer and to unite them as one kingdom. And the Apostle John says, which is a revelation of the Lord Jesus Christ, when you finally see these kingdoms agreeing and uniting, then it's going to be destroyed. And we've had a 60-year celebration from 1957, so it's relatively recent. It's relatively recent. So we're not far away, young people. And we're going to, those of you who are unbaptized, we're going to have a chat about this, I think, on Friday night. But that's where we're going to finish today. I was going to tell you about Brexit, but I'm not going to tell you about that. So that's it. That's it. That's what I'm going to talk about, or that's what I've talked about today. We're going to move out of Revelation, and we're going to look at some nice visions now in Zechariah and Isaiah. That's all the signs of the times that we're going to talk about. But it is really, really interesting. What we're seeing in Europe today, and this emergence of this new European political force over the last 50 years tells us we're really, really close, young people. We're really, really close.